Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us at this event. This is the third session of the four-part series, U.S. Singapore Relation at 55. In this session, we discuss the economic ties between the two nations. My name is Vumi Kuan, and I am an associate professor at the Kuan School of Public Policy. I will be the moderator of this event. As we learned from our today panel discussion, the U.S.-Singapore relation have been prospering over the past 55 years, navigating through difficult times and formidable challenges to make outstanding achievement, not only in economic outcomes, but also in fundamental foundation for the two nations to advance together to the future. From the view of a researcher in the field of economic development, I believe that the U.S.-Singapore partnership can serve as a living example of how two nations, regardless of their stark differences, from population size to geographic location, from natural endowment to political dynamics, from social context to the level of development at the beginning of their partnership, they can come together to produce so much synergy for each other and to make meaningful contribution to the global economy. To help us understand better the development of the U.S.-Singapore economic relationship, I am delighted to have here with us three distinguished speakers who are involved with both strategic and operational efforts to promote the economic ties between the two nations. Mr. Chua Soon Long, Dr. Lei Xian, and Mr. Christopher Quillivan. Ms. Chua Soon Long is a director for North America and Europe at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, or MTI. Ms. Chua leads the MTI team responsible for Singapore economic engagement with the North America and Europe markets. He oversees various G2G economic engagement agreement, including the U.S. Singapore and the EU Singapore FTAs, and was also part of the Singapore TPP negotiation team. More recently, Mr. Chua served as the chief negotiator for the UK-Singapore Free Trade Agreement and is chief negotiator for the ongoing UK-Singapore Digital Economy Agreement negotiation. Next, Dr. Lei Xian is CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. This is the largest and the most active international business association in Singapore and Southeast Asia, with over 6,000 members from more than 500 companies. Dr. Lei is also adjunct professor at the National University of Singapore and a member of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health Advisory Board. Dr. Lei received her BA with honors from Stanford University and PhD from Johns Hopkins University. Last but not least, Mr. Christopher Quillivan is a counselor of the Commercial Affairs U.S. Embassy in Singapore and a senior foreign service officer with the International Trade Administration U.S. Commercial Service. Mr. Quillivan began in 2019 his four-year assignment at the U.S. Embassy in Singapore, where he led a team responsible for trade promotion program in Singapore and support U.S. business interests regionally. Mr. Quillivan prior overseas posting include China, Canada, Belgium, and Greece. Now, I would like to start with Mrs. Chua, please, to give us some reflection and observation of the relationship between the two nations, U.S. and Singapore.
Thank you, Prof. Vu. Good afternoon to everyone on the panel, and also good day to all of us who are tuning in from your different time zones. I'm very pleased to join this panel today. I would like to begin by thanking the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy for this invitation and also organizing this useful series on the U.S.-Singapore relationship. We're meeting in a very special week of the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris's successful visit to Singapore. Quite a number of bilateral initiatives were announced this week. It was a very productive visit and really underscores our excellent and growing bilateral relations. But the relationship between Singapore and the US is not just about what happened this week. It's about what happened over 55 years. There is a larger story, a multifaceted partnership that has been steadily growing stronger and deeper over time. Please allow me to share some observations on the bilateral economic relations. Let's go back a bit in time in history to the 1960s, in the early years of Singapore's independence. Now, we know that was a very challenging time for Singapore. Yet from the very beginning, we eschewed the economic orthodoxy of that time. We decided to open ourselves up and to connect with the world. US companies, along with others from Germany and Japan and others, were one of the first to put their trust in us. For example, we saw Mobil coming over to set up shop here, and that really contributed to the start of the really thriving energy and chemical sector here in Singapore. Then we move along to the 1970s, where we started to see the electronics boom in our part of the world and globally. Hewlett-Packard, HP, first established its base here in 1970. And there's this little known fact that I wanted to share, which is that HP started manufacturing its Thinkjet printer here in Singapore. And that particular printer, I think it really marked the end of the dot matrix printer. I think a lot of us may not be familiar with that old printer. Now, moving on into the 1980s, again, we see a new industry sector starting up, and that was the hard disk drive industry. Seagate was the first to set up here in 1984, and at our peak, Singapore accounted for over 60% of the world's hard disk drives. And if we fast forward over to the 1990s, we also see that the activities of US companies here in Singapore, they continued to diversify further. So we saw the start of the pharmaceuticals as well as medtech industries as well. So names that are very familiar to all of us, MSD, Thermo Fisher, they all started establishing themselves here. They've since contributed immensely to R&D in the pharmaceuticals and medtech industries here. Moving on to the 2000s, we see that US companies are here, not just in manufacturing, but also in the services sector as well, in the mines industry. Marina Bay Sands, a lot of us are familiar with it. One of two integrated resorts here in Singapore has since become a distinctive part of our skyline. And it would be remiss of me not to mention the U.S. Singapore FTA as well, which entered into force in 2004. That was the first free trade agreement between the US and an Asian country. And I think it really, set some path-breaking initiatives in place. For instance, the provision on express shipments, this was a key enabler for the subsequent growth of this particular express shipments logistics business in the region. So where are we today? I think notwithstanding the COVID-19 pandemic, bilateral trade has more than doubled compared to before the US-Singapore FTA entered into force. Singapore is now home to nearly 5,500 US companies. They continue to expand their activities here with a view to access opportunities in fast-growing Southeast Asia and the rest of the region as well. The US is Singapore's largest foreign direct investor by far, with investment stock of 428 billion Singapore dollars last year. What does that number really mean? Just to give a few examples, that is about 30% of the US's stock of investments in the whole of the Asia-Pacific. It is also more than the US's investments in China, India, and South Korea combined. In turn, Singapore is the second largest Asian investor in the US, just after Japan. Singapore supports also over 250,000 American jobs through our imports from the US and also our investments there. So looking back, there are some key observations and themes that start to emerge. Allow me to share a couple of them. I think firstly, over 55 years, the US and Singapore, we've been close partners in our growth journeys together. This partnership is a dynamic, forward-looking, and win-win partnership. We are always keeping up with the latest trends, partnering to seize new opportunities together, embracing innovation, managing change. All of this is supported by a like-mindedness, respect for the rule of law, protection for IP rights, and most importantly, upholding the rules-based trading system. So this week, the Vice President's visit marked yet another step forward for our bilateral economic relations. Allow me to share two particular initiatives. The first one is an upcoming new U.S. Singapore climate partnership. Under this collaboration, we are going to hold consultations between our experts to see how we can create opportunities for our businesses and our workers in green growth sectors. What are some examples of these sectors? These include green finance, carbon markets, and also this larger topic about energy transitions, including clean energy, low carbon solutions, clean energy infrastructure. A second initiative that I wanted to share is the Partnership for Growth and Innovation. This is something that we're still working on. It will be an elevation of an existing collaboration platform MOU between my ministry and the Department of Commerce. We're going to start with 4 pillars as a beginning. First, on digital economy. Secondly, the energy and environmental technologies. Thirdly, advanced manufacturing. And fourth, healthcare. We hope to launch this initiative formally in the coming months. With this, I end my opening remarks for now, and I hand over to Dr. Lei.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chua, for your so thoughtful presentation and a lot of information for us. And I talked to the American investor here and business people here. They're always happy with Singapore. So, from my own experience, I know that actually the business association usually worry a lot about, the government policy, whatever, in other countries. So it means the Chamber of Commerce is so important to help them to fix problems. So I really wondering why actually they need the Chamber of Commerce here in Singapore. But the Chamber of Commerce here, the AmCham here, so successful and attracting 6,000 members from more than 500 companies. So it's great to hear from Dr. Lei, why and what we are doing so that you're so successful in this favorable condition for American businesses in Singapore. Please share with us.
Thank you so much, Professor Vu. Thank you so much to the audience for joining us today. It's a thrill to be sitting here at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. School doesn't always seem like fun, but it is when I come here. So thank you so much, Prof. Vu, and also for Shen Long for your very positive comments about American business. Most of the companies, in fact, all of the companies Shen Long mentioned, are members of the American Chamber of Commerce. Now, to Professor Vu's question, why would they want to belong to an American Chamber of Commerce? They're already big companies. They have direct access to Shen Long and his colleagues in the Singapore government. We all know that the Singapore government is very business friendly. So what's the point of my sitting here with you today? Well, the positioning, I think, you can see even where I sit right now between Shen Long and Chris Quinlivan from the U.S. Embassy is that we are a bridge between the Singapore government as well as the U.S. government. And we're also a bridge between the different companies and the individuals who work at these companies, whether they be Americans or they're Singaporeans or any other nationality. And that's what I'd like to focus my comments on today, which is really around people and community. I've been a member of the Chamber for more than 10 years. I am an American, and I married a Singaporean really long time ago, about 30 years ago. So I've been coming in and out of Singapore for some time. We moved back to Singapore about 13 years ago, and at that point in time, I could be like any other business person entering Singapore, wondering where do I even start? And that is what an American Chamber of Commerce or the British Chamber of Commerce, any Chamber of Commerce can do for those workers who are new to Singapore, looking to make friends, looking to be a member of the Singapore community. And the Chamber of Commerce really plays that very important role for the individual who comes to Singapore and wants to really make Singapore their home and to contribute. Now, on the company level, of course, that is where we really focus our efforts because the companies take care of their employees. Now, at the company level, the 3 areas that we focus on as a chamber in terms of the support that we provide would be along advocacy, business insights, and connections. So let's take a look at advocacy first. Now, again, to Professor Vu's point, do we really need to advocate? The government understands our needs. Well, the truth is, once in a while, you might need to provide some feedback because things happen, decisions are made, and it is important for the companies who operate here to have a chance to share their point of view. And it is a little uncomfortable sometimes, as you can imagine, when you're in school and you are the only one raising your hand to say something. That feels awkward. But the chamber can actually represent and be the voice of our member companies on issues that might be a little sensitive or uncomfortable. So as advocacy, an area of focus that we deliver for our members, it really is looking at ways in which our member companies can provide the input that makes Singapore even better than it is today. So it isn't about criticism, it isn't about negativity, it's about positivity, it's about value creation, it's about, as my friend said, force multiplier, being able to take something that is meaningful but also expand upon it. And that is the advocacy piece of what we do, is that positive enforcer being able to grow something bigger. The second area that I want to talk to you about is business insights. Now, as businesses, we need information, we need data, we need to really understand how people are feeling about their work. For example, when you talk about human capital, we need to understand how companies are planning to expand or invest. Those are the kinds of things that we can ask our member companies, so they provide the business insights that make it possible for people to do future planning, whether that be government or other companies. Future planning is incredibly important because, especially in a time like now when we have COVID-19, the more information and knowledge sharing you get from other companies within the chamber is how we all learn and grow and improve and be resilient, particularly in a time of crisis. Now, my final point is going to be about connections, and it's my favorite piece because I love the idea of community. When I was interviewing for this job, as you can see, I'm a public health person working at a chamber of commerce, but it's actually highly similar. There's huge connections between public health and business and community. Because you look at community and how we support each other, how we connect with each other, and how do we help each other. And that's my favorite part of this job and what we do at the chamber. We help people. So whether you are a business person or a company or even the government, you can come to us and we will help you. And if I don't know the answer or my team, we don't know everything, but we know who we can go to get you the answer you need so you can stabilize your business, create a sustainable business model, and also grow your business. And that's the work we do here in Singapore to provide that support for the business community. And Prof. Vu and I had talked earlier, he very astutely pointed out, you're about value creation. That is absolutely right. There may be problems from time to time that we're asked to help solve, but at the same time, what we look at is creating value. We want to look to the future to be thinking about what are we going to be doing in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, when our children are growing up. That's what the Chamber of Commerce is here to do, support businesses for a more vibrant, resilient economy so that communities can grow and prosper. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lei, for your very inspiring speech. Actually, give it a lot of food for thoughts. So thinking about building ecosystem here in Singapore and within your organization, and I really like your value proposition. So they make you very valuable to others.
So you're as a member, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Now I move to Christopher. Actually, in Singapore, I think we have made a lot of achievement, but I don't see any complacency here with Christopher or the embassy. They're very busy working on, the new initiative to promote the relationship between the two nations. So I'm wondering what they are doing. Of course, the day before yesterday, I listened to the very inspiring and visionary speech by Vice President Harris. And she mentioned that, 20, 30 years from now, we look at this moment and could be proud of what you're doing today. Even withdrawing from Afghanistan, but actually you can build a greater future for Asia and ASEAN. And Singapore, my home country, Vietnam, would be examples for other nations to learn how we can work together, navigating through on difficult times and formidable challenges to build a greater future together. So now we are very keen to listen from, Christopher, about your view and what you're doing as well, in promoting in your job into the time to come. Yes, great.
Thank you very much, Professor Vu. It's great to be here today with the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and thank you for welcoming me here. It's great to be joining this audience. On behalf of the U.S. Embassy, the U.S. Department of Commerce, I am delighted for the opportunity to highlight the 55th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the United States and Singapore and speak on this distinguished panel and share my thoughts about our economic relationship. I'll focus my comments on three areas. One, where we have been, two, where we are now, and three, where I think we're going. Well, our governments have played a large role. To a large extent, the United States and Singapore's shared history, as Shun Long had mentioned, has been written by our private sector. So let's make that clear first. Private sector has played a huge role. Now, I think it's fair to say that our histories are interwoven. Our partnership is indispensable. Americans and Singaporeans have played critical roles in one another's success. These historic U.S. Singapore economic ties run deep, strengthened further in 2004 by the U.S. Singapore Free Trade Agreement, which I know was the United States' first FTA in Asia. Since this FTA came into effect in 2004, trade between our two countries approximately doubled. Over the past 55 years, we have grown together and developed a trust that comes from a like-minded view of business. This view has helped both our countries become more secure and more prosperous. On economic matters, I believe there are few countries in the world that are more like-minded than the United States and Singapore. When it is, whether it's supporting free trade, valuing the rule of law, or protecting intellectual property rights, our two countries are more often than not in strong agreement. Three, today. Today, the U.S. and Singapore share an exceptionally strong and enduring trade relationship that brings strength and stability to our countries, as well as the entire Indo-Pacific region. The United States is the largest single foreign investor in Singapore, with almost $250 billion in U.S. foreign direct investment. Today, more than 4,500 American companies operate here in Singapore, many of which use Singapore as a base for operations all across the Indo-Pacific and beyond. These American companies make high-quality investments in their local communities, employing thousands of people and driving innovation and prosperity in each place they operate. We're proud that the U.S. private sector continues to make positive contributions in shaping how the workforce of tomorrow will evolve and adapt in Singapore. Even during this COVID-19 pandemic, which sent the global economy into one of its worst recessions ever, the U.S. and Singapore have worked continuously together to deepen economic cooperation. For example, recognizing the significant global tightening of credit during the economic downturn, both countries signed a memorandum of understanding last year to extend trade financing and investment support to companies in Singapore and the United States, especially directed to help SMEs. And now looking to the future, and while we're embarking on a new era in our world marked by heightened interconnection and interdependence between our nations, we continue to forge new partnerships. During Vice President Harris's historic visit earlier this week, she announced several new initiatives that reaffirm our strong strategic partnership and also broke new ground in a range of key issues, including climate change, cyber threats, promoting inclusive growth and innovation, and resilient supply chains. As Vice President Harris said, this moment gives us an opportunity born out of crisis to fix and find solutions to long-term issues that have challenged us, but to do it in a way that is consistent with our vision for the future and how we can be more efficient and more collaborative. The U.S. will continue to build on our partnership as an Indo-Pacific nation. Focusing on trade aspects of these partnerships, Vice President Harris remarked that the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Singapore Ministry of Trade and Industry will collaborate to forge new partnership for growth and innovation. It is envisioned that this new partnership will strengthen U.S.-Singapore trade and investment, collaboration in the areas of digital economy, energy, environmental technologies, advanced manufacturing, and healthcare. We want to promote inclusive economic growth, innovation and entrepreneurship, shared prosperity, in the United States and Singapore, as well as throughout the Indo-Pacific region. At the U.S. Embassy in Singapore, we're particularly proud of how our personal engagement with our Singaporean partners has built a foundation for a stronger future for both our countries and the region. I believe these past 55 years of partnership are just the beginning. As long as our shared vision endures, and I'm confident it will, the United States and Singapore will continue to grow from strength to stronger together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christopher, for your inspiring speech again. Now, we actually have discussed a number of things that's most exciting for us to learn about the U.S.-Singapore economic relationship. But now I want to go deeper into the fundamental factor underlying this robust development of the relationship. So we try, at our school, we try to identify at least three fundamental factors that determine this success. So each of you, can you give us, your own views of the three, if you have to list out three, fundamental factors underlying the success of the U.S.-Singapore economic relationship, can you share with us? So I would like to see any overlap or differences here. Yeah, so I start with Mr. Chua.
Sure. Thanks, Prof. Vu. On three possible factors, I'm just going to share my personal view as well. I think more fundamentally, it's really about being like-minded and trusted partners to each other. And I can unpack that into 3 points. The first one is that we share interests and beliefs. Things like making a strong stand for upholding the rules-based trading system, things like believing in good governance principles, things like respect for rule of law, taking intellectual property rights seriously, and also very importantly, ensuring that there are business-friendly conditions and environment for companies to prosper and workers to thrive. That would mean things like connectivity, having a vibrant ecosystem here in Singapore. So that's number one, the types of shared interests and beliefs that we have. A second point is the actual track record. So it's not just the words that we say, but also our deeds, our actions. The US, as well as US businesses who are long invested here, they know that they can trust Singapore to honor our commitments even in the toughest of times. For example, I think during the pandemic, Singapore was one of the few countries which did not impose export restrictions, and we allowed essential supplies to flow from and through Singapore to frontline medical workers around the world. So that's just one example as well. A third point that I wanted to make is really about win-win partnerships. I think it's important as the times change to keep coming up with a positive agenda that is mutually beneficial. So that we focus on creating value together and focus on the positive aspects of a relationship and to grow that. Many US companies, they come to Singapore, they set up shop here to manage their operations across ASEAN and the Asia-Pacific. When they do well in this region, in our country, they're also able to contribute back home to the US economy as well. And in turn, workers in Singapore and in this region, we too benefit. Training, higher wages, fulfillment of aspirations, broadening our vistas. So really, I think there is this mutually reinforcing relationship where it's beneficial to both sides, where essentially when the companies do well, the workers do well as well, and I think just gets better and better from there on. So I think those are the 3 points for me, Prof. Vu.
That's wonderful. In our research, we're thinking about endogenous process. Your successful and reinforce your success further. On the determinant of success, getting stronger and stronger. Now I move to Xian. What are your views?
Yes, I would like to build upon what Shenlong said, and I think, Prof, when you talk about the ocean and the sea and all of the openness, I mean, if you think about fundamental human desires and nature, I think that's one of the reasons why the US and Singapore have so much in common. And if I have to make a list of 3, which I did.
Yes, important, yes.
I did my homework. I do think number 1, the 3 things I'm going to mention would be around fairness. Right? The idea of diversity and inclusion. And the third would be creativity and innovation. And maybe it's a reflection of the fact that I'm also a mother. So when I think about the fact that I have 2 children who grew up in Singapore, and fundamentally, what do I want them to grow up in? And fundamentally, what do businesses need to thrive in Singapore? It's not that much different. We're all humans, we have basic desires. What makes us happy makes us successful. So if you think about fairness, the idea that we come and do business in Singapore because it is possible to know that when you do well by society, and you are mindful of what you need to contribute to the community, so that you're not here to just take, right? You've got to give. And that's a fundamental idea around what is fair? What is fair to contribute? What is fair to ask for? I believe in Singapore there's an open dialogue on that. And that makes it possible for US companies to succeed here, because when they come and they're considering Singapore as a base for their operations, they know that they will be treated fairly. So very important, fairness. The second point on diversity and inclusion, I think is really important, particularly in this day and age. You have seen so much upheaval around the world, so much unhappiness, because certain groups, however you define them, feel excluded. That we can't operate like that. And one of the things I'm very proud of, I believe that the members of the American Chamber of Commerce really prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is how we fundamentally grow as a society. And that is how we grow as a business, because businesses rely on people who want to be included, who want to be considered. And also, it's really boring to work with people who are exactly like you. And American companies really embrace this idea of diversity across all ages, across all ethnicities, across anything you can think of. I was, sometime back when I was an early manager, someone said to me, "Do you realize your team, they all are kind of like you?" And I thought, how dare you? But then I looked around and I thought, he's right. So I was very, very mindful, always to look for that special something different. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I believe those are the hallmarks of US businesses and Singapore businesses too, which is why, again, US businesses thrive in Singapore. The final point I want to make is the fun part, the creativity and innovation part. I tell you, I've been in Singapore for so long, and every day I am thrilled to see the creativity across all aspects of society, the embrace of the arts. Let's not forget that the arts, although it seems somewhat disconnected from business, hard, cold cash, it's not like that. Art feeds into innovation, innovation feeds into society. All of the cool gadgets that I see in this room right now as we're filming this, like Shen Long said, remember Seagate? They made so many hard drives, was it? Innovation from Singapore, and some of it in collaboration with the US. And I don't want to steal Chris Quinlivan's thunder, but one of the programs that I absolutely love is Select USA. And this year, for the winners of Select USA, I went, and these are Singaporean companies who won these category awards, and I think there were some sustainability projects when I went and stalked them on LinkedIn, because I was so impressed with what they are doing in terms of innovation, and that takes creativity. All of that combined, I think there is no question why US companies, Singapore companies thrive both here in Singapore as well as in the US. Did I hit all 3 points okay?
Wonderful. I'm delighted that actually you very thoughtfully compliment the point made by Sun Long. At first, when I first came to Singapore, I thought Singaporeans usually think the same way. But here you're so diverse, you're totally different, but complement each other. And definitely, this is the strength of Singapore. That's what actually the robustness of this society. We, share the same belief, but however, the view of whatever we observe may be very much different, but complement each other. That's wonderful. Now I have Christopher, to offer your own views on this.
Thank you, Professor Vu. And I'm afraid I might not get an A+ on this assignment because I feel like the 2A students have already stolen most of my thunder here. But I think, it's the like-minded business approach. I think if you're a Singaporean company and you go to the US, you're going to feel pretty comfortable in doing business there. And likewise, and this is really my second one, US companies coming to Singapore over the years, the 55 years, have found a home in Singapore. Singapore is there's a reason why we have 4,500 plus U.S. companies here in Singapore, it's because this is where they're comfortable. It's a home, and it's based on a lot of things. A shared business approach and regard for rule of law and these kinds of things. But it's also the shared values of the people, and I think that really is why so many companies have come here to Singapore. And why so many Singaporean companies honestly have come to the U.S. and found a home there as well through our Select USA program. As Xian mentioned, we work to help Singaporean companies that want to come to the U.S. To give them information that helps them be successful there, working together with our partners in MTI, and it really is a partnership. I think we work very closely and seamlessly together. And then that kind of brings up the third, which is the attention of the governments that they've given to to maintaining and building this relationship over the 55 years. I think both the Singapore and the U.S. government have continuously looked for ways to build on that relationship over the years, and that really underpins and supports the business that's occurred, and I think that's a fundamental aspect as well of this success.
Wonderful. Actually, we make a very valuable point here. Somehow, actually, echoes the point made by Xuan Long and Lele Xian as well. Value creation, like-mindedness, or strategic trust. But we make another important point. I think actually the both governments have to be very willing to strengthen further relationship and never fall into complacency or blaming whatever. Yeah. So they only look forward to the future. So now I have a quick question for all of you, because your future, are now full of opportunity and challenges. So what actually your view of how Singapore and the US can work together to create a lot more value into the future, not only for the two nations, but also for ASEAN and Asia and for the whole world? So Long, go first, please. Yeah.
Yeah, sure thing, Prof. I thought maybe I'll just share two upcoming opportunities, actually. So like I mentioned just now, I think with a strong basis and a strong foundation in this economic relationship, in the past we've placed a lot of emphasis on the flows of trade. You have goods, you have services, you have investments flowing around. I think increasingly in recent years here in Singapore, what we're seeing is that some of these flows are turning digital. So you have brand new digital flows and digital activities, of course. Those have got to do with some of the big branding companies that you think of, or the apps that you use on your phones and so on and so forth. But we forget that actually in the rest of the economy, across all traditional sectors as well, there is also this quiet digitalization process happening. So as more and more of our activities go digital and enter that digital realm, I think apart from goods, services, and investment flows, we also need to look at the fourth flow on data. And I think that's exactly what Singapore's focus and emphasis has been thus far on digital economy agreements, to make sure that we ensure that Singapore's digital economy is connected and interoperable with the digital markets of all our key partners as well. So I think in the digital economy, this is a huge area of opportunity for all of us. It's almost like going through your storeroom and discovering that there's another 100% version of what you have been doing all along, but as yet, undiscovered. Yeah, there's a huge area of opportunity. A second new area that's coming up is the green economy. I think there has been a lot of emphasis over the past few years, actually, this growing awareness that is important for all of us to work together to overcome the climate challenges that are on a global scale. So everybody needs to work together to tackle a global challenge. Now, the question is, how can we find market-based pathways where it makes sense for the economy to want to pursue green goals? In other words, we have to make this something that's commercially viable and commercially makes sense. The answer would be in firing up the green economy. There are so many things that we can do right there. in terms of trying to facilitate trade and investment in green goods and green services, but we often forget about green technologies as well. I think there's a lot for governments and companies alike to really exhibit leadership and start catalyzing the development of green technologies so that they are adopted and implemented at a larger scale. Some of these technologies will be things like hydrogen, carbon capture utilization storage, and also, for instance, industrial energy efficiency solutions. And just now I talked about goods, services, investment, and data flows. I'm going to contribute a fifth flow here that here in Singapore we're also looking into as well, and that's the flow of carbon. Because within the green economy, basically underneath all those activities, it's also this idea of the flow of carbon. How are we going to actually ensure that there's an efficient flow of carbon so that those of us who are able to generate, for instance, carbon credits, nature-based solutions, how can we offer that to those who need such carbon credits? That's also another question that we need to address in the green economy of tomorrow. So again, Prof. Wu, just these two ideas coming up, digital economy and the green economy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chua. Actually, you mentioned some very strategic points. The point actually the Singapore government will promote in the time to come. And in my own observation this day, I'm also working closely with Sembcorp in Singapore. Sembcorp have been so successful in Vietnam, building 10 industrial parks, attracting 850 companies, employing 250,000 people. And these days, Sembcorp working in Vietnam, try to promote green transformation. So we're doing a lot of renewable electricity generator there, and we work closely with them. And definitely Singapore will emerge stronger in the time to come, and ASEAN also the same thing. So I really hope actually Singapore will make very meaningful contribution to the recovery of the region in the post-pandemic era. Now I move on to Xian Xian.
Thank you very much. I can build again upon Shenlong. It's so nice to come after you because, it just triggers thoughts. But it's perfect timing for us to have this discussion about opportunities and challenges, because here at the Chamber, we do 3-year strategic plans, and we're in the process of doing our next 3-year strategic plan, which will be covering 2022 to 2024. And just to let you know, so you get ready for the party, in 2023, the American Chamber of Commerce in Singapore will be celebrating its 50th anniversary in Singapore. So it couldn't be better timing to start rethinking what our strategy should be, especially in the context of the massive disruption we've just experienced with the pandemic, but then the coming up disruption or the ongoing disruption from climate crisis. So if you think about what Shenlong said around digital, one of the strategic areas of focus that the Board of Governors at the American Chamber of Commerce and the team, including input from Shenlong and another colleague at the U.S. Embassy, as well as our Chargé d'Affaires, is around digital value creation. Now, what does that mean? Because we've been talking about digital for so long, and that is the challenge of AmCham, to think about how do we support our members and be a platform for them to create digital value together. And I do believe that digital economy agreements will help our member companies think through how they leverage digital tools, thinking about e-commerce for small and medium-sized businesses. I know that there are some challenges always when you are starting to sell your products across borders. Those are the kinds of things that the Chamber would love to be able to contribute the input of our members in order to have this ecosystem that facilitates free commerce, right? So that's really important, digital value creation. The other strategic area of focus that we've been thinking about for our strategic plan is around sustainability. So that's a no-brainer as well, isn't it? So climate change, or as Vice President Kamala Harris calls it, climate crisis, those are areas in which we also need to bring together our members to think about collectively how can we come up with solutions, right? You can't just identify problems all the time. You've got to come up with some solutions. So we're very fortunate. I'll give you an example. DBS is one of our member companies, and so we began this series that focused on sustainability. And what I love about it is oftentimes you go to webinars like this one, and there's a lot of really surface level talk, but I like to do deep dives and learn as much as I can about a particular topic. And that's what we're starting to do now with sustainability, because it's such a new area that a lot of people are really quite lost as to where to start and what do you need to know. So DBS has kindly come in to start doing these deep dives with select member companies in small groups, so you can learn about things like green finance, transitional finance. Did you know transitional finance is colored brown? So at least it was on their slide. So going from brown to green. And then also carbon exchange. So as you might know, there is a new carbon exchange platform that's a partnership between, I believe, DBS, Standard Chartered, and Temasek. So those are fabulous initiatives that we hope to continue to build upon with the in service of our members. So that's sustainability. And our third strategic area of focus, which is also an opportunity in response to challenges, would be around talent. And that goes back to what I started with, isn't it? It's all about the people. You can talk about climate crisis, you can talk about digital value creation, but what is it all for? It's for the people. And so from a talent perspective, currently, our original thinking, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it, it would be, thinking about talent in the idea of skilling, right? There's upskilling, there's reskilling, there's this skilling and that skilling. It's all about continuous learning. Now, you know that I continue to have a role at the School of Public Health at NUS. I want you to learn. So skilling is very important, whether you're on the job or just walking around, you gotta learn stuff. And then the other area of talent that we really wanna focus on is also really driving this ability for Singapore talent. And there's so much Singapore talent. We wanna elevate you, we wanna promote you, we wanna push you up. What can we do to help support you to do that? And all our member companies, I can tell you, are very, very invested in that. And the final point I want to make is, because we're a chamber of commerce, there's also the leaders, our CEOs and our CFOs. They also need a little bit of tender loving care. So we also focus on that, because with the right leadership, you can accomplish so much. So when you go to work tomorrow and you're looking at your boss and you're thinking, she's the CEO, she doesn't need anything from me, you'd be wrong. And so tomorrow, you think about you as a person and your boss as a person. You can imagine how the talent conversation changes. And that's the three areas that we're focused on: talent, sustainability, and digital value creation, opportunities in response to challenges.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It's amazing to me that AmCham Singapore have so clear and effective strategy. That's wonderful. It's very much like the top business. So we care about, embrace digital revolution, promoting green transformation, and investing in people and caring for the people. That's wonderful, and explain a lot why actually AmCham Singapore have so successful.
Thank you so much.
And now I move on to Christopher, but because I actually let you stay, I would like to actually express my thankfulness to the American people, because yesterday Vice President Harris promised to Vietnam that we actually deliver 1 million doses of Pfizer vaccine within 24 hours, and now our people from Vietnam, so delighted informed that actually the vaccine have arrived, and we're so grateful, to the American people during this difficult time. And from the bottom of my heart, actually, deeply, deeply appreciate that one, and hope that actually all of us will work together throughout this difficult time and to prosper in the post-pandemic era. Now, I give you time to talk about your view.
Well, thank you for that, and I know we're all in this together, as they say, and something we definitely have to all fight together, this pandemic. I think what's striking to me in this conversation is that it's the title is kind of reflective, right? 55 years we're coming, but so many of the comments have really been forward-looking, and I think that really describes the relationship, because it is never static, it's always forward-looking. And I think I don't disagree with anything that my two panelists said in terms of the strategic vision and kind of looking forward, and how the U.S. is approaching this as well. I think that we are very, very, I think part of our cultures and our economies are really driven by innovation and by really looking at what can we do to stay relevant, what can we do to stay viable economically. And it's really not driven by the governments, it's driven by the private sector, because that's where this innovation is coming from. And so the governments are really there to support the private sector in both of our countries, and I think that is what we'll continue to do. And along those lines, I think what Shunlong has outlined in terms of where we will be looking to kind of focus our attention is we're very like-minded in that way. I guess I'd add advanced manufacturing and healthcare in terms of areas where I think we have a lot of innovation to share and to create those synergies to kind of help propel us forward. And I say those two terms in the broadest way. I think we're looking at a new economy globally, and Singapore and the U.S. are kind of on the leading edge of that economy. And we're going to face a lot of challenges together in terms of workforce, which Xian has mentioned, and don't disagree with that at all. But with those challenges, I think we're really approaching it from a very collaborative and forward-looking perspective. Here in the U.S. Embassy, we have 24 different agencies represented, and those agencies, that's a very broad collaboration among U.S. government agencies, and it's really focused at to some extent the region and our focus on the Indo-Pacific region, but also really deepening that relationship with Singapore across many, many levels of the organization. So across the governments and the organizations within the governments. So that's where we'll continue to focus our strategy, kind of helping Singaporean companies that want to go to the U.S. and explore the opportunities from the innovative economy in that direction, supporting U.S. companies that are coming here to Singapore and tapping into the Southeast Asian market here, as well as making sure that we can do our part to make those things fruitful.
Thank you so much, Christopher, for your very important point. But here I would like to pick up a very interesting point I have not heard before. The U.S. now care a lot more about staying relevant. That's amazing, because in the past you thought, all nations have to follow, the American standard, whatever. Now the U.S. actually look out and try to be relevant to other nations. So working together to build the future. So I think somehow Singapore make contribution to the change in the U.S. politics and way of thinking. So definitely together we can build a great future. So now I think we can move on to the audience, so that you can receive some questions and address and respond to them. Do you have any questions from audience? No, I don't have any questions from audience. Which is pop up here. No. So we can continue, right? Okay, good. Thank you. That's wonderful. So if we do not have any questions from audience now, I give each speaker 1 minute for making final thoughts, starting with Sun Leong, please.
Right. Thanks, Prof. For my concluding remarks, I just wanted to mention that I really appreciate the discussion that we've had today in terms of sharing all our different views of how things happened in the past, where we are today, and where we are headed in the future. I'm borrowing Christopher's really useful framing because I think this really puts into perspective where we are and where we want to go. And I particularly appreciate the discussion about the types of areas of opportunities that may be available to us, and also not just the opportunities themselves, but how we want to get there, which is what Dr. Lay mentioned just now in terms of diversity, in terms of equity, in terms of inclusion. So I think not just alignment in terms of the destination, but also how we want to get there. And I think that really goes back again to the larger point about trust and like-mindedness between partners. That degree of familiarity between us, I think that portends, quite a lot of good things going forward. Yeah, that's some of my reflections for today.
Sincere, please.
Well, if I'm going to think about U.S.-Singapore relations, and keeping in mind I've been coming to Singapore for about 30 years at this point, which is more than half my life, it's, I want to issue you a challenge. Because I remember when I was little, a lot of times people would talk about American culture, American movies, and that was a lot of the conversation. And of course, at that time, I was a bit younger, so nobody's going to talk to me about their business plans or what's business model innovation. But at the same time, I think often the culture, the focus has often been around that American culture. And we love our Netflix and we love our, Avengers, so it's awesome. But what I want to challenge our audience is to start thinking more broadly, because this relationship is going to hit some, tough times. Not the relationship necessarily itself, but it might. But just all relationships, right? You're going through, the time passes, and stuff happens, and it's not always a bunch of flowers like you see in movies and pretty Chanel clothes or whatever. Actually, I shouldn't say Chanel; it's French, isn't it? But if you think about it, things will not always be easy. So while we sit here and we're smiling and we're very positive, I want to challenge you, our audience, to think about the fact that what endures is not always easy, okay? So the U.S.-Singapore relationship has been flourishing for 55 years, but because it is hard work, right? Both parties have to commit to it. The American Chamber of Commerce, our member companies have also made their sacrifices and have also contributed to society. So when you think about relationships, when you think about U.S.-Singapore coming together, when you think about your role, and perhaps you already work at an American MNC, perhaps you're thinking about going to go study in the U.S., you are an ambassador of Singapore to the U.S. Just as I would say for any American coming to Singapore, please remember you're an ambassador of Americans. Please, when you come here, be respectful and continue to really contribute to the community, because I'm going to bring it back to community. I'm going to bring it back to people. That's what it's all about. And at the American Chamber of Commerce, that's what we support. We support organizations, we support companies, but we also support people. So thank you very much, and I hope to see all of you at an American Chamber of Commerce event in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher, please.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more that, this relationship it doesn't just happen organically. It takes work, and I'm really happy to be here doing that work. I can tell you I've been posted, and I think this is my 8th overseas assignment, and definitely one of the most pleasurable assignments that I've had, an opportunity to work with a host government that's very collaborative, open-minded, and engaged. And I found that to be very refreshing, and it allows us to have frank discussions. We don't always agree. There isn't always, it isn't always, what did you say, flowers and rainbows, or something like that. However, it's very respectful, I would say, and very, we listen to each other, and we engage each other. And I think it shows in what's happened in these 55 years and how far we've come. I was, I think, one of the users of one of the dot matrix printers that you were referring to, Shinlong. So maybe that dates me, but I remember even into my college years using the dot matrix printer, and I think I can remember it saying "Made in Singapore," probably. But it's definitely a relationship that's endured the test of time, and I'm very optimistic about where we're going and the opportunities that especially this economic relationship presents to both U.S. companies that are looking to grow their business in Singapore, but really throughout Southeast Asia and the broader Indo-Pacific region. Singapore will continue to play a big role in that growth for U.S. companies. But also, I think the U.S. economy has a lot to offer these companies, Singaporean companies. I see so many great ideas coming out of Singapore, innovative startups that are looking to grow and looking to, and really have a lot of innovation to offer to the world. And I think the U.S. represents a great place for them to plant those seeds and grow. So with that, I look very forward to the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So all of us actually have made a final thought wonderfully, but now I just received 3 questions. So we have to continue our work. So the first question comes from Tessa Sabrina Tam. The pandemic had caused an economic depression in most of the world. How does this affect the economic climate in the region? And how can the U.S.-Singapore partnership help in this regard? So anyone can take this question. Cynthia, you look ready.
No, this one I'm going to have to defer because you can see I am a little bit about flowers and rainbows, and this is a tough one. This is I think it's a good question. You
can nominate anyone, yeah.
Economics.
Yeah, Christopher.
Yeah.
I'll just say, I think, yes, I mentioned a little bit about some of the things that we did during this pandemic to extend, make sure that capital flows could continue, that companies could continue to access financing to purchase goods, to keep the goods flowing when credit was beginning to look like it was drying up in the early stages of this pandemic. As we look forward, I think we've outlined an agenda with Singapore government and other countries in the region of how to continue to create the kind of economic environment here in the region that will allow the private sector to flourish, and for and that's kind of across the board in terms of rule of law, IPR protection. I could go on. There's lots of things we can focus on that will really create the kind of economic climate here in the region that will continue to draw companies into the region and continue to support investment in the region. So I think that's, as we come out of this pandemic, we'll continue to see these kind of efforts to spur the economic growth in the region through U.S. investment and investment from other countries as well.
Wonderful. Sulo, do you want to have to add some point here?
Yes, just want to add a couple of points to what Chris has already nicely shared with us. I think on reflection, the COVID-19 pandemic is something that sort of took the world almost by surprise at that time when it first emerged. And I think it is a crisis that's not just about public health, but it's also about livelihoods, it's also about the economy. The disruptions are quite far-reaching, and I think it has affected a lot of us, not just in terms of business activities, but also in terms of our lifestyles as well. As sometimes a new COVID variant emerges, and then we have to respond immediately and swiftly. A couple of things came up over the past, I would say, 1.5 to 2 years. I think one of it is that the importance of supply chain resilience really came to the fore. And I'm very glad to share that between Singapore and the US, we've always throughout this whole period ensured that our supply chains remain connected and open to each other. I think that's really important. How did we manage to do that? And I think there are 3 key points to this. The first one is trust. Continuing that relationship, knowing that we're open to each other. Secondly, in terms of connectivity, making sure that basically the planes continue moving. If the passenger flights, the belly hold is not able to carry cargo anymore, can we look to the cargo planes instead? Can we transfer some of the air cargo to some sea lanes instead? So that's another one. Thirdly, I think in terms of the diversity of sources as well, a lot of us have had to diversify our sources of supplies. I think throughout the whole region, this is something that we've had to contend with. So supply chains is one. Another one is, and this is something I can assure all of us tuning in that it's something that's really been preoccupying the minds of all the government officials in Singapore, in the US, and also with our other partners as well. And that's how to emerge strongly from this crisis and to recover and build back better. I think this phrase, build back better, keeps coming up in all our conversations. And that's why we wanted to make sure that we don't only focus on the challenges of today, but also focus on the opportunities of tomorrow. And on that note, I fully agree with Christopher just now. It's so telling that we talk about the past 50 years when most of our conversation is about what's going to happen in the future. Because that is what's going to take us out of this pandemic to make sure that we all get back to where we want to be, the trajectory gets back to pre-pandemic levels and beyond. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Xian, do you have?
Well, it's interesting because, again, I'm a slightly different perspective because of who I am and what I do. And so when I think about the economy, the one thing, if I put my public health hat on, is I would say that we still have to fix the problem of making sure that everyone is vaccinated. So when Prof. Vu said earlier that the US will be shipping millions of vaccines around the world, including to Vietnam, that's not to be discounted, right? Because we can't get the economy back on track if people are not getting vaccinated, if testing is still as difficult as it is, because I tell you, there's the up the nose thing, we have to find some other technology to test people because we know we're going to have to do it. So when it comes to the economy, we really still need to get the pandemic under control. And I can't help but to be a little bit controversial here, but to ask for a little bit, because the member companies within AmCham are just very concerned about finding a way to travel, right? The concept of quarantine is, of course, public health directed, and it makes sense, but it makes it very difficult for businesses to operate. And if you think about even Singapore businesses, the need to expand, because we want Singapore businesses to become multinationals as well, we're gonna have to find a way around the quarantine situation because it is slowing down our ability to help companies scale up. And if we wanna build back better, that's definitely something we're gonna have to fix. But it comes back down to, how do we manage the virus? So as I always do, please get vaccinated. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now I have a lot more questions coming in.
Wow.
Here actually some simple question. Are there any tariff imposed on export from Singapore company to US? Sure Long, please.
Well, that's a quick one. No, tariffs have been eliminated under the U.S. Singapore FTA.
Okay, great. The next question is quite challenging. From Haifeng, how do you say you can you predict the time of pandemic ending? Anyone can make a guess?
To the doctor.
Yes, right, yeah. Strategic people.
How much money are you gonna give me?
Yes, that's right.
Well, hey, look, we are now talking about pandemic to endemic. And so if you think about how viruses work and how they mutate, there's actually hypotheses that some of the common cold viruses, which are the same type of virus as COVID-19, coronavirus, that they also started a pandemic, I don't know, thousands of years ago. They started off as pandemics. And that over time, because of population susceptibility and immunity, over time because the virus changes, as we understand COVID does as well, that sooner or later, because of all these different factors, that the virus becomes the common cold. And that is what we expect COVID-19 to become as well, which is why in Singapore, we have begun the conversation of moving from pandemic to endemic. But if you want to know when is this going to happen, well, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. It depends on if people are able to get vaccinated. And let's face it, vaccines are not available to everyone, as I said before. So I tell you to get vaccinated. So if you have access, you better go get vaccinated. But not everybody is as lucky as we are. And when we talk about testing, that's something, it's not fun, but that will help us. And so if you think about how this happens, the sooner we can get our act together and do the things that we need to do, the sooner we can outsmart this very clever little virus. But eventually, because we know the behavior of all viruses, all is a bit of an exaggeration, but we know the behavior of viruses, we will be able to move beyond the crisis that we're in now. But timing-wise, I'm not going to venture a guess.
Okay, great answer anyway. So the next question by Ông Rujun. Would the panel have any views regarding the possibility of U.S.-China economic decoupling? What effects might this have on Singapore, and how can we address this issue?
I mean, first of all, we are engaged with China economically. The United States is invested in China, and I think will continue to be so for quite some time. I don't see decoupling as imminent. We will continue to engage and work with China.
Well, maybe I can add my 2 cents as well, which is that for Singapore, we are not part of this relationship between the U.S. and China. So we look at it from the side here where we are in our region. We think that it's important that the world's 2 largest economies, that they find some way to be able to resolve differences as they arise. I think in a way that's somewhat orderly and supports peace and stability in the region. I think that's the top line request from all companies, all countries. We all want peace and stability. And I think it's heartening to know that between the US and China, they've continued to keep up their conversations, continue to keep up their dialogues, even recently as well, picking up the phone to call each other and so on and so forth at high levels. So I think as long as the conversations continue, as long as there's this desire to find some constructive way forward, I think that's always a good sign and very welcomed. Because I think that would then contribute to the stability of the regional architecture.
Great, thank you so much. The next question from Willie. With the recent visit by the Vice President of U.S., Ms. Kamala Harris, U.S. has started Indo-Pacific as a strategic partner. What does this mean for business collaboration with the U.S. in the future? This question actually may want to see. Okay, because the U.S. tried to be a strategic partner of the region. So actually, any explanation of U.S. strategy into the actions?
Well, as I mentioned, I mean, the United States is an Indo-Pacific nation, and we are going to continue to be engaged with this region. We look at Singapore as a strategic partner, and we'll continue to work closely with Singapore. I think what that means for the business relationship is that it will continue to flourish. The security relationship between the United States and Singapore, I think you can directly tie to the business relationship, where they support each other, these 2 relationships. And I don't expect that to change. In fact, we look to deepen those relationships.
Great, thank you. Actually, I have 2 questions, but have similar requests here. The pandemic effect on the relationship between Singapore and the U.S. Do you think the pandemic helped or deter the relationship between the 2 countries? So, what are your views of this thing? Just
I think the pandemic has injured everybody. It's injured everybody, and it's to say it helped would be, I think the wrong phrase. It certainly has made us appreciate what we have. I think all countries around the world, but I can, speaking of this bilateral relationship, I think appreciating the relationship we have, appreciating the cooperation we have, it's reminded us of the value of that as we strive to overcome these challenges, but certainly hasn't helped. and I will say, the distance that we are from each other has always been a challenge. The geographic distance and the limitations on travel because of the pandemic have made that distance even more challenging.
No, I remember when my parents first learned that I would be moving to Singapore, and we're originally from Taiwan, you might be able to see from my name, although I am American. My parents said, wow, Singapore is so far away. Why is this so much farther away than Taiwan? The plane trip is so much farther. And so Singapore is really far away.
I was surprised flying just a few weeks ago back from the U.S. and Japan is about halfway.
Yeah, exactly. Why?
I was going to add that the pandemic is certainly something that we do not wish on ourselves, and I do agree with Chris that on balance, of course, the pandemic is a net negative for the whole world. But I think what really matters is also how we respond to this challenge. And there's this need to continuously maintain this glass half full mentality to try and find opportunities and try to see how we can overcome and adjust to the challenges. So whether it's here in Singapore, whether in the US, I think we've all tried to adjust to the challenges as best as we can and also try to seize the opportunities where they are. I think what's most important is how we respond. Yeah.
Excellent.
I think the one other thing that I have to say, because it's obvious, is the digital connection that we've basically perfected now, I think, or at least we're on the road to perfecting with phone calls and being able to see each other. Those tools were there before, but we didn't really utilize them. Now we have to utilize them. And that there is some advantage to that. We have been able to do a lot more than we ever thought possible via Zoom calls and MS Teams and Facebook Live and all the other digital platforms out there. Right. So that's I guess in some ways a benefit from the virus.
And now we have final question and very practical one, because now Germany and Singapore have bubble travel scheme. Do you expect that the U.S. and Singapore will have this bubble travel scheme very soon?
Well,
I'll let you answer.
No, I'm like, hello, Shenlong. Yes, please tell us.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab at that question. I'm afraid I don't actually have a definitive answer, but what I can confirm is that I think there's a constant desire here in Singapore to restore connectivity and to enable travel as much as possible as soon as the conditions permit. So I think we are always, watching very closely the developments that are happening contemporarily, and then seeing whether, perhaps, the incident rates will have come down, perhaps vaccination rates will have gone up, and so on and so forth. All these data points are very useful for us to then decide how to best calibrate the policy on cross-border travel. I need to just make a plug for my ministry, Ministry of Trade and Industry. I think we certainly are very, very much committed to ensuring that companies based here in Singapore, including the AmCham member companies, are able to conduct your businesses effectively and efficiently out of Singapore, because we acutely understand that a lot of your operations here are meant to support your regional hub activities. And this is certainly something that we want to work to support.
Thank you.
And I would say, for Singaporean companies that want to travel to the United States, having just made that trip fairly recently myself, you'll find it pretty easy. You just get on the plane and go.
Thank you so much. Now our session actually come to an end. I hope actually throughout the wonderful contribution of our panelists today, we have learned a lot. For myself, I would like to take away 3 big things that we can learn from our panels today. And in Singapore, we want to start with the S letters. The first one is actually because we want to think about the fundamental factor underlying the robust and enduring relationship between Singapore and the U.S. and will be prospering into the future. So 3 S factor here. The first one, actually, as our panelists emphasize again and again, the strategic trust, the like-mindedness, and many other things to follow. So definitely, we need to have to maintain, to nurture strategic trust so that we can come together when we face formidable challenges and uncertainty. That's very important thing. The second one, I like to say point, value creation. We need to have synergy, big or small, whatever. But we come together willing to create a lot of synergy for each other to build the future. So benefit a lot from working together, very important. And the third one, actually, the symbiotic partnership. We need a vibrant relationship at lower level, people to people, company to company, UnCharm, whatever, so that it can endure time and survive on kind of unpredictability or difficulty, so can be very resilient, like a living creature, can stay for a billion years. So symbiotic, partnership is so important. So with that, I would like to end our discussion today. And before I ending the session, I would like to express my deep gratitude to our speaker here. I spent a very precious time to make very valuable point and vibrant discussion. And with that note, I would like to thank all of you for joining us at this amazing event. So before I end the session, I hope you enjoy it, and would like you to join us on Thursday, September 30th at 5:15 for the next session of U.S. Singapore Relation at 55, our shared past and future. The final session is a 4-part series. We cover U.S. Singapore people-to-people ties. So again, it's about symbiotic, partnership. So I look forward to see you in the next session. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.